Of course, the trial was a global phenomenon, but this was also a very personal tragedy for the Steenkamp family.
Sally McNeil.
It seemed like a perfect marriage of two competitive bodybuilders, but behind closed doors, steroids made things volatile.
On Valentine's Day in 1995, professional female bodybuilder Sally McNeil fatally shot her husband Ray and called the police to confess. The couple had met 8 years earlier at a bodybuilding program in the U.S. Marines, but Ray was reportedly violent and unfaithful to McNeil. On the night of the shooting, McNeil claimed she had acted in self-defense, stating that Ray tried to strangle her when she confronted him about his infidelity.
Steroids were involved also. It makes for an explosive and volatile situation.
However, the prosecution successfully argued that the shooting was premeditated, based on the trajectory of the bullets and the blood splatter evidence. Consequently, McNeil was convicted of second-degree murder in 1996 and sentenced to 19 years to life. Despite multiple appeals, she remained in prison until 2020 when she was granted parole.
They say she blasted her husband with a shotgun, then went to the bedroom to reload, and then returned to shoot him a second time in the face.
Mark Rogowski.
A former professional skateboarder and now convicted killer may be on his way to being a free man after spending more than 30 years in prison.
Mark Rogowski was only 14 when he began his professional skateboarding career in 1980, and it quickly took off. He won national championships and secured several endorsement deals, earning thousands of dollars every month. His rapid fall from grace began when he broke up with his long-term girlfriend, Brandy McLean, and turned to alcohol to cope. Angry and jealous of McLean's new relationship, Rogowski directed his rage towards her best friend, Jessica Bergston.
The prosecutor said Rogowski abducted Bergston from her apartment in Pacific Beach and hauled her off to his condo in Carlsbad.
In March 1991, Rogowski invited Bergston to his house, where he sexually assaulted and murdered her. He later admitted this crime to a spiritual advisor, who convinced him to confess to the police. Rogowski pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and sexual assault, receiving a sentence of 31 years to life.
Well, that's right. After Mark Rogowski was granted parole last year for a second time, Governor Newsom once again reversed the state parole board's decision to release him.
Evangelos Kousis.
The gangland war exploded into the public arena back in June 2003, when Carl Williams ordered the murder of Jason Moran from the notorious Moran crime family.
In the late 1980s and early 90s, Evangelos Kousis made a name for himself as a boxer and kickboxer, winning the World Middleweight Championships in kickboxing. At the same time, Kousis worked as a nightclub bouncer and became involved in Australia's criminal underworld. This association led him to become entangled in the Melbourne gangland killings, particularly the murders of Lewis Kane and Louis Moran.
Louis Moran, the patriarch of the Moran crime family, was shot dead.
Kane was fatally shot in May 2004 after a meeting with Kousis and another associate. Despite claiming self-defense, Kousis was convicted and sentenced to a minimum of 15 years in prison. He was later tried and found guilty for the March 2004 murder of Moran, who was ambushed by masked gunmen. This led to him being sentenced to life.
The notoriety, the drugs, the gangland stuff, your life, has it all been worth it?
No.
Jovan Belcher.
And is he breathing?
She's still breathing, but barely. Please hurry. I don't know how many times he got her. They were arguing.
Jovan Belcher was a linebacker for the Kansas City Chiefs who was beginning to gain traction in his professional football career. Belcher lived with his girlfriend Cassandra Perkins and his mother, who was helping them care for their young daughter. Belcher and Perkins had a rocky relationship filled with constant fights and arguments. On December 1st, 2012, during one of such arguments, Belcher shot and killed Perkins in front of his mother.
ABC News has learned that he regularly visited gun ranges and had several weapons in his home.
He then drove to the Chiefs' practice facility where he took his own life, despite pleas from the general manager and coaches. After his death, it was discovered that Belcher suffered from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, leading his mother to file a wrongful death lawsuit against the Chiefs.
But police say the 25-year-old then drove to Kansas City's Arrowhead Stadium, thanked his coaches for believing in him, and shot himself as they watched in horror.
Eric Naposki.
Guilty of first-degree murder, a former football player has been convicted of killing his lover's boyfriend in his Newport Beach home.
In December 1994, millionaire investor Bill McLaughlin was shot and killed in his Newport Beach, California home. At the time, McLaughlin was living with his girlfriend, Annette Johnston, after divorcing his first wife of 24 years. Unbeknownst to McLaughlin, Johnston was secretly involved with Eric Naposki, a professional football player who had played in the NFL and the World League of American Football.
I said, Dad, I don't really like her. I think she's with you for your money.
The murder remained unsolved until 2009 when authorities arrested and charged Naposki and Johnston. They claimed that Johnston, who stood to collect $2.5 million from McLaughlin's life insurance and savings, had orchestrated the murder and enlisted Naposki to carry it out. Although they both maintained their innocence, Naposki and Johnston were convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment.
A California jury convicted former NFL linebacker Eric Naposki last July for a murder he says he did not commit.
Bertil Fox.
3 days later, he visited Leoka at her mother's design shop. Only Bertil knows what happened next.
Bertil Fox was born on the Caribbean island of St. Kitts and moved to London as a toddler. In his teenage years, Fox began bodybuilding and quickly became a powerhouse, winning nearly every possible contest and earning the nickname Brutal Bertil. That name took on a darker meaning in September 1997, when he fatally shot 2 women in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Leoka's family also wanted the relationship to end. Her mother, Violet, intervened.
The victims were Violet Brown and her daughter Leoka, who was Fox's former fiancée. While Fox claimed the shooting was accidental, his best friend testified otherwise. He was convicted and sentenced to death by hanging, which was later commuted to life imprisonment. After serving 25 years, Fox was pardoned by the Governor General of St. Kitts and Nevis and released in 2022.
He had to do something. He felt like if he couldn't have her, then why should anyone have her?
Chris Benoit.
Well, the wrestling world in shock today. Former champion Chris Benoit found dead in his Atlanta home along with his wife and young son.
This Canadian wrestler achieved worldwide fame in WWE, winning 30 championships in various international wrestling tournaments. By 2007, Benoit was already a 2-time world champion and was poised to win a 3rd championship on the night of June 24th. However, he failed to show up for the match. When authorities entered his home the next day for a welfare check, they found the bodies of Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel.
But go back real quickly if you can for this text message. It's got to be at least very alarming or very strange for them to say you need to go to this house and check it out.
Over the prior 3 days, Benoit murdered Nancy and Daniel, placed Bibles beside their bodies, and then took his own life. An autopsy later revealed that Benoit suffered from severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy and had misused steroids and alcohol, which could all have contributed to his unimaginable actions.
In reality, WWE superstar Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel are dead.
Hiroshi Ogawa. Financial struggles are common, but they can sometimes push people to take disastrous actions. Take Hiroshi Ogawa, a former professional baseball pitcher for the Lotte Marines in Japan. Ogawa left the sport in 2002 and began working at an industrial waste disposal firm. Not long after, he went bankrupt and decided to seek financial help from his boss. When he visited his boss's home, he encountered the housekeeper, 67-year-old Kazuko Nishiuchi, whom he reportedly asked for a loan. Nishiuchi denied this request, causing Ogawa to physically attack her, leaving her unconscious. He then stole money from the house and disposed of the housekeeper's body in a nearby pond. Ogawa was ultimately found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment in September 2005. Oscar Pistorius.
Well, now all anyone cares about is what drove this Olympian to shoot his girlfriend 4 times in the early hours of Valentine's Day.
In 2012, South African sprinter Oscar Pistorius made history as the first double-leg amputee to compete in the Olympics. Before this momentous achievement, he had already won several Paralympic gold medals, becoming both an inspirational and influential figure in sports. But things took a tragic turn in 2013 when he was charged with the murder of his girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp, at his home.
This legal saga has lasted nearly 5 years now, but this morning it took just minutes for a judge to more than double the jail sentence for Oscar Pistorius.
Pistorius never denied shooting Steenkamp, but he claimed to have mistaken her for an intruder. Initially, he was convicted of culpable homicide and sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, on appeal, this conviction was upgraded to murder, and his sentence was increased to 13 years and 5 months. After serving over 8 years, Pistorius was granted parole in 2024.
They managed to spirit him away from the prison near Pretoria without being seen. He is now believed to be at home at his uncle's house in a wealthy suburb of Pretoria.
Aaron Hernandez.
Hands that caught so many touchdown passes in handcuffs today as he was led into court, charged with the brutal murder of his friend Odin Lloyd.
Aaron Hernandez was a fierce NFL tight end who played 3 seasons with the New England Patriots. He seemed destined for a long, successful career, but that all changed in 2013. In June of that year, the body of Odin Lloyd was discovered at an industrial park near Hernandez's home. Lloyd had met up with Hernandez the day before his death, and they had driven around together.
You were with him just hours before he was murdered.
Yeah.
What'd you guys do?
hang out. It was a typical Sunday.
Hernandez became the prime suspect and was soon arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Less than 2 hours after his arrest, the Patriots released him from his contract. Hernandez was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole. In 2017, while still appealing his conviction, he took his own life in his prison cell.
We do move on tonight and to new reporting here this evening after a former Patriot star was discovered dead in his cell.
Did we miss any other killer athletes? Let us know in the comments below.
Few have fallen as far or as hard as former NFL star Aaron Hernandez.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from Watch Mojo and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.